Good day, guys. Travis here, Efficiency Hobbyist. So let's cherry pick some data today because yesterday was kind of an odd day weather-wise for my house. So from the time I got up until the time I went to bed, it was very nearly a constant 16 degrees outside. So this is kind of cool because it's not necessarily unusual to have an average daily temp of 16 degrees where I live, but usually it's because it was colder at night and then warmer during the day. But yesterday, that was not the case. We had a cold front blow through from somewhere further north, and West Virginia is usually just not accustomed to a continual deep freeze of one temperature. So this is some kind of cool data, and I just thought it'd be fun to maybe do a shorter video about it. So that you can see what we're talking about, this was 8:01 a.m. I know this says 9:01 a.m., and I quite obviously missed setting this clock back after daylight savings time ended. And that 16 degrees basically ping-ponged around to a high of 17, and it settled back down to 15 in the afternoon before ultimately this was the last picture I took before I decided to go to bed at night, so a little after 10 p.m. This is a snapshot from my Energy Emporia View monitoring software. So each one of these hours represents the average annual energy used during that hour, and it starts with basically 12 a.m. on the left-hand side and ends with 12 p.m. on the right-hand side. So you see the maximum amount of energy that I averaged in any given hour during the whole day ended up being just under 1,800 watts of power. This is for just my upstairs unit, and this is a 30,000 BTU unit. All the information from before applies to the same thing here. This is just the downstairs heat pump that I have. So this is the same 30,000 BTU unit, but it's only heating about 2/3 of the same area as the upstairs. So the energy usage is lower overall on the day, and the averages also reflect that. So it looks like the max average that I had here for any given hour was a little over 1,200 watts. This rounds out the rest of the heating. This is actually a 9,000 BTU ducted split unit that I had in the addition that I added. So you'll notice there is a spike in this data. This is actually in the same area that my wife's office is in, and she had gone down to do some work, so she wanted a little warmer down there. So totally normal, average everyday use. If you're cold, turn the heat up. Let's bring all that together. My upstairs unit used 35.82 kilowatts yesterday, the downstairs 25.56, and the addition 14.37. That brought my total daily use to 75.75 kilowatt hours altogether. So this was a snapshot again of midnight to midnight this whole day. And if I assume that I pay around 13.5 cents per kilowatt hour, that means I spent $10.23 to stay warm yesterday. Now, obviously, this is some very cherry-picked data. It is not typically this cold in West Virginia. So let's look at what the last 30-day rolling amount was. So this data starts on 12/28 and goes through 1/26 of 26. Over that time, my upstairs unit used 667.6 kilowatt hours, the downstairs 458.5, and the addition 150.2. That means for the last 30 days, I used a total of 1,276.3 kilowatt hours in heating. So what would that equate to in terms of cost? That means that last month I paid $172.30 to heat my house. Now, if you want to compare that to what I roughly used in the same time periods when I was using propane only, admittedly, my house is more efficient now than it was then, but it was very common to use 2 to 3% of my propane tank. Now, that is a 500-gallon propane tank, so that would average out to 10 to 15 gallons of propane burned in a day. And depending on how much you're paying for propane, to make this math easy, I just did $2 a gallon, assuming you might get that rate during a summertime fill. That means that during the same time frame, I would have spent $20 to $30 for the same fill. So overall, at best, it would probably be closer to the lower 2% due to the efficiency upgrades that I've done, but that's still very nearly twice the cost of what it was for me for electricity. And for me, it's really nice having a steady amount that this is going to be. I don't have to worry about fluctuating fuel prices or anything like that. Electricity, although it can be costly, and a lot of places have different, rates for different times. For me, it's just easier to keep track of on a given amount, though, than if I were comparing it to other fuel sources. So to know whether this would apply to your house or your project, probably a little extra context is needed. This house is a little bit under 3,500 square feet, and it is certainly on the higher end of the efficiency cycle for its size. I've done a tremendous amount of air sealing insulation over the years, so apples to apples comparison would certainly have to be compared to a smaller home size than this. But I don't think it would be out of the ballpark to call this a comparison to a 2,500 to 3,000 square foot house with roughly the same size equipment. So, how do you guys feel about $10.23? I mean, personally, if I had to choose between eating a Subway footlong sub or heating my house for a day, I would obviously choose heating the house. So, personally, I don't think it's out of the ordinary or out of the realm of what it should be to heat for this amount of money. Now, for those of you who actually looked at the footage and looked at my monthly average, so that you know, that did include this day's energy expenditure. And if you do the average analysis on that, I basically spend $5.75 over that time frame to heat my house on a daily basis. So obviously there are colder days where I spend $10, but there's also days where I spend $3 or $4. The warmer it is, the more efficient these cold weather rated mini splits are. There are potentially other energy savings mechanisms through using these mini splits that you may not get with other systems. So if you take into consideration one of the older heat pump styles, so the non-cold weather rated heat pumps that only work down to like 34 to 36 degrees, and then you have a backup heating element. So part of the reason I included the average annual usages in this is so that you could see how much less energy these use peak demand as compared to the old system. So if I want to know roughly what would a 60,000 BTU heat strip run, that is approximately 15 kilowatt hours of energy. So every time that heating element kicks on, you're pulling 1,500 watts. So this could potentially have some pretty big ramifications for maybe sizing of a whole house generator, or for certainly if you are sizing a solar inverter. The benefit with these is they have a lower peak. They do run at less overall energy, peak especially. But even if you had a generator that wasn't capable of running the full heat strip, the 15K from the old style, you could literally just turn off one of the units. So I could turn off my whole downstairs unit and just heat my upstairs and be using half the energy that I would have. Now, it's not exactly half because I do share some of the heat from downstairs rises and heats upstairs, but you kind of see where I'm going with this. You could potentially save money in other areas of your home just by using, heat pump mini splits, as long as they're the cold rated one. So as always, know what you are buying. Even if I were in a warmer climate, I would not opt for the non-cold weather rated units. Look at what Texas is going through right now and how many times over the last, several years that they've had, temperatures that were way outside of what their normal ratings would be. Ice storms, power outages. So I don't think it's unreasonable to think about the importance of maybe having the mini splits that you could potentially run one or two heads, and maybe you have enough generator to do that. And so now you have some heat as opposed to no heat. So I think that there are a lot of other things to take into consideration. I know these cold weather rated heat pumps are more, but I really feel like this is one of those buy once, cry once things. If you're expecting to live in a home for the expected lifespan of one of these units, I would really impress upon you that it would probably behoove you to go ahead and just buy the cold weather rated mini splits or the cold weather rated ducted units. You can still install the backup strips in those ducted units, but you don't have to use them. It just acts as a redundancy if you do need it. Or if something should go wrong with your heat pump cycle, you still have the backup emergency heat. So for me, heat pumps are a big win. For anyone who's seen basically anything on my channel, they'll know that I'm a big proponent of heat pumps. I have almost everything in my house that comes in heat pump form as a heat pump, and I don't know that I would certainly not go back to any of the old style units. So everything is not all roses. There are some drawbacks in some instances, but really in the overall scheme of things, any drawback is far offset by how much better these units are. So with that, I think that's it for the day. I kind of just wanted a shorter, fun to do video, and I thought it would be kind of cool to just cherry pick what looks like a pretty bad day in terms of energy usage. So in West Virginia, I am in Energy Zone 5 where I live, and we only see a day this cold maybe 7 to 10 times a year. But it's nice to know that I'm capable of heating, even when it is this cold. So guys, if you've stuck with me, thanks a ton, and I'll see you in the next one.